First, like to thank everybody on behalf of the family, the yeshiva, for coming out tonight. It's tremendous chizuk to all of us here tonight as we gather for the Azkara of Rabbi Dovid Sharfman, Rav Baruch Dovid Aryeh ben Rav Nosson Dov Zechatat Levracha. Before we begin, I would like to thank the many people who helped put tonight's Azkara together. We could not have done it without their full cooperation. The yeshiva over the last 10 days has been undergoing probably the most mammoth projects from left to right all over, and to have been able to pull this Azkara together, which was the anchor for everything around it, we appreciate very much. I would like to thank Rabbi Yaakov Kier, who really had the lion's share, together with our staff, Rabbi Roth and Rabbi Zev Roth and Mr. Sender Kagan. Thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts to be able to do this in the Bakovadik way that things have been set up. We'd like to begin tonight by calling up Rabbi Sharfman's son, Mr. Yaakov Hillel Sharfman, who will address us.
It's hard to believe that it's almost 2 years since the first time I got up to be masked with my father. At the time, the pain was raw. It was difficult to see or feel anything past the current moment. It seemed impossible to contemplate going on. We as a family, yeshiva, and community were in a state of shock. How could it be that our beloved father and Rabbi was taken from us? How could we as a family, yeshiva, and community continue on without the man who meant so much to us, without the man who we all loved so dearly? My father meant different things to different people. To some he was a father, to some he was a Rebbe, and to others he was both. To us as a family, he was our father, our role model, our guide. He was the one we turned to for advice, confided in, and celebrated together with.
He loved each of us tremendously for who we were as individuals,
appreciating our different natures. He taught us to work to our strengths and feel proud of who we were. To the Talmidim, he was a Rebbe and a father of sorts. He was someone to confide in, someone to turn to for chizuk, and someone to learn from. They knew how much he cared for them, keeping an eye on their progress and doing his part to ensure their success. They knew that he was rooting for them, hoping and davening that they would succeed. A Talmud recently told me how well my father understood him and how they used to spend hours in his office talking. He told me how hard it is to carry on without him. Another Talmud related that when he heard the news, he couldn't believe the man who helped him become who he was no longer with us. He couldn't believe that he wouldn't be able to call him again and hear the warmth and love in his voice. To all of us, he was someone to look up to emulate, and aspire to be like. So I often wonder, how is it that we carry on when so much was taken from us? What has enabled us to carry on for the past 2 years with such a gaping hole in the fabric of our family, yeshiva, and community? When I think about it, I realize that the answer is pretty simple.
It's because of the tremendous Yerusha that my father left behind. Not a Yerusha in the conventional sense, but rather one of immeasurable value. He left behind a storehouse of lessons in Hashkafa, Halacha, and Musar, lessons in Chinuch and interpersonal relationships. Many of the Talmidim vividly remember his Musar groups, where he pounded into us the importance of emes and yashrus, especially as B'nai Torah, when people look up to us. The passion in his voice and the depth of Hargasha he had is etched into our memories. We remember how he talked about taking advantage of our time in yeshiva and appreciating our accomplishments, big or small. I remember him once saying how being in yeshiva is comparable to being in Fort Knox, surrounded by gold. Each of us has memories of different scenarios we saw him in and the way he approached them. We each have aspirations that he implanted within us for growth in Torah, Avoda, and Yiras Shamayim. And as I reflect, I realize that my father may no longer physically be with us, but all that he taught us and the memories we have
are eternal. Those will be here forever, living within each and every one of us, enabling us to go on, directing us, and perpetuating his legacy. Tonight I want to talk about some of the main things that I learned from my father, which have helped me tremendously over the past 2 years. I used to discuss everything with my father, and whenever I was faced with a decision, I would turn to him for his advice. I no longer am able to ask my father's opinion, but he gave me the tools necessary for making decisions. When my father was faced with a big decision, it was unusual for him to make a quick decision. Instead, the question was thought out with a lot of time being put in to weigh the pros and cons of the different options and analyzing the ramifications of the decision. Things weren't black and white, and the decisions were not made in a vacuum. Rather, he tried to take into account how the decision would affect others. It was not uncommon for me to ask my father's opinion on a matter and for him to have multiple follow-up conversations with me. In this aspect of his life, we saw a glimpse of his greatness. We saw how a Talmid Chacham does not act hastily. Seeking Das Torah was important to my father. He taught us to consult with Rabbeim and to be comfortable asking Shilas. My father encouraged us to have Rabbeim that we had a real kesher to, who would be able to understand us and give us proper hadracha. Often, after my father discussed the matter with me, he encouraged me to get a second opinion from a Rebbe of mine, even when the Rebbe was a peer of or younger than my father. My father embodied Ezu Chacham Halom Mikol Adam. He didn't only ask people wiser than him for their opinions. He asked us as well. I remember one time in specific when my father had to make a big decision about something, and he came to ask me what I thought. He wanted to hear my input. How good I felt knowing that my father truly valued my opinions and insights. But most importantly was the feeling that Hashem was in charge and that ultimately Hashem would take care of us. Another major thing we learned from my father was the proper way to approach challenges. Starting from a young age when my father lost his mother, and then later on when he was diagnosed with cancer and battled it for 10 years, my father learned how to and showed us the proper way to handle nisyonos. He didn't let hardship define who he was. He set his sights on achieving greater heights and accomplishing more. He recognized that this was the course that Hashem handpicked for him, and this was his nisayon. Instead of letting it prevent him from doing his best, he used it as a catalyst to spur him to further heights. When faced with personal challenges, it is hard to maintain the proper perspective. But I try to think back to the smile on my father's face in the last few weeks of his life, and his calming words, and how he didn't allow his sickness to stop him from thinking of others, as one final lesson in the correct way to approach nisyonos. Over the past 2 years, there have been countless times when I have drawn upon the abundance of lessons and impressions my father left behind. We as a family have had so many conversations where we were trying to figure out what my father would have done, how he would have reacted, what he would have advised. And I can't help but be thankful for the loving relationship we had with him and for how much we learned from him over the years. It truly guides us on a daily basis. I so often think about my father's sensitivity towards others, the way he cared for and treated Talmidim, his endless love and support for the family, and for what he did for people in the community, how he modeled what it meant to be a good husband, a loving father, and caring Rebbe, the way he was able to see beyond the surface and appreciate someone for who they really were. I think about how balanced and down-to-earth he was, about how he made you comfortable opening up to him, the way he was machshav people and gave them respect. And I hope that the reservoir of memories and lessons we learned from him will give us the chizuk to continue on without him, and that it will enable us to stay connected to him and help us continue to grow as people and Ovdei Hashem. May it be a big schus for his neshama. Yhi zichro baruch.
years ago was the last Pesach we had together with Abba. I want to share my memories of that Yom Tov with you. Abba was always so excited when a Yom Tov was approaching. Weeks before, we would see the dining room table pile up with Sfarim he was looking into in preparation. Even though Abba knew so many divrei Torah about the Haggadah, each year he would go to the Sfarim store to see which special Sfarim came out for that Yom Tov. He wanted to be able to look through so many Haggadahs at the Seder, and he was worried he wouldn't have enough space for them all. He decided to buy a special table that could be set up near his seat to accommodate them all. He bought us little kids Haggadahs with beautiful pictures so that we would get into the spirit of the Yom Tov. The excitement on his face was contagious. He sang so many songs during the Seder with us all. He enjoyed listening to all of our divrei Torah, and he challenged us with thinking questions. Mostly, though, what was especially important to him was that we learned the lessons and messages of Pesach. On the last days of Pesach, he would always ask us what we were taking away from that Yom Tov. Abba, we are preparing for Yom Tov as you have taught us. Abba, we will all miss you so much this Pesach.
I would like to address all of our audience tonight. Many of the alumni are here. Friends and family, and to everyone who's listening to this streaming live. And I address myself to the Sharfman and Kamen families. For those Talmidim in the yeshiva that did not have the schus to know Rabbi Sharfman, he possessed many skills and talents in which he was exceedingly outstanding. It is rare to have all of these qualities coalesce into one human being. Rabbi Sharfman worked on all of these qualities. He nurtured them, adjusted them, perfected them, and then he modified them what was necessary for each Talmud as was needed. He was a bona fide Talmud Chacham. His brilliance and hasmada were demonstrated through his shiurim, through his responses to the tens of questions, halacha questions that would be asked him daily, but everyone that walked by had another question for him. He was disturbed time and time again by the Seder he had with Rabbi Shafran, constantly stopped for another question. He was a brilliant speaker. His command of the English language was masterful. You could listen to him for an hour and it would feel like 5 minutes. He was a Baal Chesed par excellence. No task was too small or too big to help someone. If he found out a Talmud was sick, that was enough to send him into a frenzy. He would go shopping. He bought them books to read. He would call and visit like he had all the time in the world. He had a sharp-witted sense of humor, and he used this to put people at ease by always trying to extract the lighter side of the situation. This midah, which he perfected, it made him so approachable, so well-liked, so sought after. Talmidim would wait, sometimes for days, to unburden themselves to him, to someone who they knew would understand them. The midah that I believe defined him, which I think Yaakov nailed, was his slavus for Torah, his passion and drive. He would challenge the Talmidim, wake up! And he was not just referring to the morning shachris, although he challenged them there too. Wake up! Pick up a sefer on Shabbos, Ben Asdarim. Is it important to you? And he modeled this. He had no tolerance for superficiality, any fakery. You're dedicating a year of your life to learn? You mentioned like Fort Knox. He pushed you to imbibe it, to savor it, cherish it, to learn it, not with your lips, learn it with your heart, with your entire being. I've been looking for this chazal that Rabbi Sharfman said over to a vad of the Rebbeim. I asked him to find it for me himself. He couldn't find it. And last night, as I was preparing, I said, I got to try. I wanted to say over this chazal. I was hesitant to say it. I heard it more than 10 years ago from him. I found it in his chus last night. The Medrash Rabbah in Parshas Yisro says, it says, Kosomar leves Yaakov. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, I'm going to give the Torah to the ladies, to the women first. Because when I gave the last tzivoy, the last commandment, I gave by the beginning in Bereshis, I gave the tzivoy to not eat from the Eitz Hadas. I gave it to Adam first. And that didn't work out too good. The Medrash says that Chava ate from the Eitz Hadas because she was offended that the Ribbono Shalom gave the tzivoy to Adam and not to her. She was offended. She was insulted. You give it to Adam? Why did you give me the tzivoy? So Chava wanted to undermine the mitzvah. The Medrash says, Chav Ches Gimel, Shmos Rabbah. So Rabbi Sharfman asked the kasha. It's a beferisha, not like that, from the Chumash. Open up the Chumash. You see a whole dialogue going on between the Nachash and Chava. The Nachash is the one who enticed Chava to eat from the Eitz Hadas. What's Pshat? The Medrash saying that she was insulted from the Ribbono Shalom didn't give her the tzivoy first. So Rabbi Sharfman said Pshat. He said, on the conscious level, yes. She had this whole back and forth with the Nachash, and the Nachash said, who said, and you can't even touch it, and he pushed her into it, see nothing happened, and she said, okay, I'll eat from it also. But on the subconscious level, her passion was to undermine that mitzvah. And Memela, the Nachash, the whole dialogue with the Nachash was able to get in. But that's not what really was going on. What was really going on, and it could be Chava was not even conscious of this. She wanted to undermine the mitzvah. And Rabbi Sharfman would speak, and he told the Rebbeim, you have to teach with his slavus. The Talmidim have to hear where it's in the kishkas, and we have to give it over into their kishkas. so that deep down on the subconscious level, the decisions that a Talmud will make will be from the inner core, from the heart, deep, deep recessed into the neshama. And this is what his life was all about. This is where it came from. The 10 years that he pushed himself, in retrospect, he was still apologizing. But a week or 10 days before Yaakov's Chasana, he was apologizing that he couldn't be here for Shachris that day, but he couldn't be here. He was still apologizing. He wanted to be here for every second. He did not want 1 second of tour, not one. That was the passion with which he lived. And Baruch Hashem, that passion that is slavus is embedded into the walls of the yeshiva in our Beis Medrash. May the lessons and midus and ashkafas that Rabbi Sharfman lived for always continue to reverberate through the walls of our yeshiva. May it continue to be a chizuk to the family. May his legacy continue to be a zchus for his rebbetzin, his children, and his grandchildren. Yehi zichro baruch. We have an unusual opportunity tonight. I would like to first call up a Talmud. It's a little funny to call the Rosh Hashiva a Talmud. Rabbi Yoshua Schloss was here as a Talmud in high school and before. And he came back and he learned Rabbi Sharfman. In case people don't know, Rabbi Sharfman was the first Rebbe. When we started the Beis Medrash from year one, we had before that, Rabbi Grumlat was giving shiur, but they were mostly branchers, people that were borrowed for 2-3 months at a time. Rabbi Sharfman, when we opened the Beis Medrash, was the first-year Rebbe. He was the founding first-year Rebbe. And the Beis Medrash began with his shiur. And Baruch Hashem, for all the years, we owe that. Rabbi Schloss was probably from the first group that had him in his shiur. So Rabbi Yeshua Schloss, Rosh Yeshiva at the Tiferes Torah of Boca Raton, fondly known as TTV.
Rishus Ma'arbeim, the Rosh Yeshiva, Chashiv Rabbanim, the family, the Bnei Yeshiva, and Chashiv Alum. A few weeks ago, I got a call from Rebbetzin Sharfman asking if I would share a few words tonight. To be honest, internally I was quite apprehensive. What a daunting task, to try in some way to describe the source of my own very powerful feelings towards Rabbi Sharfman Zatzal, and even more inadequate to try and describe Rabbi Sharfman's greatness. How such a down-to-earth, regular person was able to reach such incredible godless and have such an incredible effect on so many people. But as Mr. Sharfman will tell you, I said yes without any hesitation. First, because how could anyone say no when asked to speak about Rabbi Sharfman? As everybody here knows, he never ever said no. No matter how busy, no matter what was going on, whenever he was called upon for anything, his answer was always yes. But the main reason I said yes was because there are no words to describe the incredible level of Akaras Tov I feel towards Rabbi Sharfman Zatzal and Yibadol Chaim Rebbetzin Sharfman. And I would like to share for a few minutes a few minutes, why I feel so much Hakaras Tov. I believe a little different than Rabbi Palgan described. I have a very unique relationship. Because although Rabbi Sharfman had many Talmidim, those deep relationships were formed while they were in Rabbi Sharfman's shir. Unfortunately, I never had the fortune to learn in his shir, except for many years later as a Behelfer. Yet he became my Rebbe, someone who I looked up to, and more accurately, who I idolized, even though I never once stepped into his shir. Our relationship started, I don't know the exact date, I believe 22 years ago. I and a couple of guys were recruited to come back to Forum Miami's first base medrash under Rabbi Gumblat. That year, Rabbi Sharfman was hired to be the 9th grade Rebbe and mashkiach in the base medrash. And after spending many hours building Rabbi Sharfman's sukkah that year, I developed a relationship that although I have been zocheh to learn under many incredible Rabbeim, including Rabbi Luben, Shlita, Rabbi Gumblat, Rav David Harris, and Rav Shiva Chavetz Chaim, Rav Henoch Leibowitz, Rav Sharfman, who was very much their junior, made such an incredible imprint on me, on my views in life, on my picture of how a Ben Torah lives his life, of what it means to be an Eved Hashem, to be so regular, so normal, so down to earth, but so completely dedicated to Hashem. He made such an imprint that when I first came to Chavetz Chaim in Queens, the picture of the Gavra, the Lamdin, the person I had in my mind was Rabbi Sharfman, someone whose das Torah, his clarity, his strength, his incredible das and seichel permeated everything he did. I so looked up to him that I recall when I was talking to an older Kol guy, and I had been talking about Rabbi Sharfman, he turned to me and said, "You know, you're very different than Rabbi Sharfman. You really can't become like him." He clearly picked up on how much I wanted to be like him. When I was dating, it was Rabbi Sharfman and Rebbetzin Sharfman's mutual respect and unified mission that I so hoped I would recreate in my own home, and who was and is a constant household name. And when I try to understand what was it that made such an imprint on me, what was it about him that I was so enamored by, I could probably be here for a very long time, describing many characteristics, midos, stories, and moments that added up to such a relationship. But there are two aspects that I would like to focus on tonight. The Navi tells us that when Achaz went on an attack of Klal Yisrael, he tried to shut all the Batei Midrashim, he tried to shut all the shuls, and Yeshaya HaNavi stood up against him. And he said, I don't have Yeshaya in front of me, I apologize. And he said, Anochi v'yoladim, I and my children will ensure that Torah will last forever. And Rashi says, who are these Yoladim? Who are these children? They were his Talmidim. And my Rebbe, the Shiva Chavetz Chaim, pointed out, why did he refer to them as Yoladim? Why at such an important juncture in Klal Yisrael's history, when so much was at stake? Said Yeshaya Navi, the reason I know they'll stick with me, the reason I know they'll attach to me, the reason I know that I can count on them is because they're my children. Because the relationship that was formed, that was developed, was a relationship of a father to son. And I believe the reason that I and hundreds of Talmidim became so attached to Rabbi Sharfman was his love and his incredible ability to make you feel how important you were and how much he cared. He made you feel like his child. When I was single, a couple days ago, I would come back from yeshiva during the year, and there was not a time that I would come back that I would not stop by the Sharfmans. I had to drop by my parents first. And I would come to visit, I wouldn't call, I would just show up. I was a little kid, sorry. And I have no idea what was going on in the house, because no matter when I came, good or bad, or what else was going on, everything dropped when I walked in. The Sharfmans made me feel like nothing else mattered. Rabbi Sharfman would sit down with me on the couch in the living room, and often Rabbi Sharfman would join, because Rabbi Sharfman's Talmidim were her children as well. And he would ask me how I was doing, and we would discuss as if nothing else mattered, as if nothing else was going on. For those moments, it was as if I was his child returning from yeshiva. And I may have thought that was unique. But over the last 2 years, I have realized this is how he made everyone feel. He cared so much and gave over so much of himself to his Talmidim when it's his Talmidim. When I was getting married, he didn't wait for me to call. He didn't wait for me to send him a ticket. He just flew to my chasana. He didn't stand on ceremony. Rather, he booked a ticket and he came, because of course, he wasn't going to miss my wedding. I got a chance to see how much achrayus and responsibility he took for every Talmud a couple of years ago when I started working in the yeshiva. After the first year I worked here, he gave me a compliment to try to make me feel good. And he mentioned how there were two guys in the yeshiva that Baruch Hashem I became close to help, who with his busy schedule he was not able to connect to. And he went on and on about how amazing that was. And to tell you the truth, I didn't think it was so amazing. After a whole year of working in the yeshiva, hopefully connecting to some guys, affecting two people was not exactly what I was expecting to hear. But then it dawned on me exactly what Rabbi Sharfman was saying. Although the yeshiva was Baruch Hashem very matzliach, to Rabbi Sharfman, the level of achrayus and pressure that he felt to each Talmud, to make sure that each Talmud was successful, was incredible. To him, the fact that there had been two guys that might not have been reached and were reached, that made all the difference. To him, that was such an enormous weight, such an enormous achrayus, and the fact that I took care of that, in his mind, dwarfed anything else I possibly could have accomplished. That's why I made it up to at least make myself feel better. But to tell you the truth, that's not enough to explain how he had such a great effect on me. On what caused me to look up to him so much with respect, and what made me want to be so much like him. Nor does it explain how he was able to inspire so many people. How when he spoke to a crowd of people that didn't really know him, his words always detonated. How when he would speak to you one-on-one, he would be able to get away with saying things, talking straight like no one else. And you would be makabel. And the reality is there are many things this could be attributed to, but what always struck me as his power to connect, his power to inspire, can be summed up by the words of Rabbeinu Tam in Sefer Yashar. The Rabbeinu Tam says, "V'kasher yalami luzulaso," when you go to teach someone else, or yiyasir l'talmidav, or to give rebuke to his talmidim, al yishkach liyasir nafsho imo u'lamda. Don't forget to reprimand yourself. Ki lo nachon la'adam liyasir l'zulaso b'ma she'eno oseh. It's not appropriate to be miyasir someone else on something you're not doing. U'lamed ma she'eno mamin bo. Or to teach someone something that you don't believe in. Ki kol davar sheyetze min halev yikanes halev. Only things that come out of a heart enter a heart. V'chol asher lo yetze ki min hapeh lo yaver ha'ozen. And he quotes, V'haya chacham omer, there was a wise person that said, Kishi Yisrani Adam, when someone gives me rebuke. Ve'ertzel lahakir imamusar hu hahu yavo min alev. And I want to know, where did that come from? Did it come from his heart or did it not? Era, I look. Im nichnas musaro libi, if it enters my heart, visora nafshi lidvarav, and it awakens my soul inside of me, akir b'chol libo uv'chol ma'odo hu medaber, then I know he's talking from his very essence, from everything that's a part of him. What the Sefer Yashar is saying, if you want to know who the person inspiring you, the person giving you musar, who really is, there's a litmus test. There's a way to see who he is. There's a way to see inside that person's heart. If his words penetrate, if his words speak to you, if for some reason every time he yells about an injustice or defends someone or tells you what you're doing incorrectly or just says over a hashkafa with such clarity or speaks to a crowd and it penetrates your heart, says Rabbeinu Tam, that's because it's coming from the depth of his heart. His hashkafa is who he is. And that, I believe, was Rabbi Sharfman's secret. The reason every time he spoke and everything he said had such an incredible effect, and the reason I and so many became so attached to him, is because everything he said and everything he did came from such a place of truth, from such a place of sincerity. He was completely what you saw, Tocho Kabaro. And that is why he touched our heart in such a real way. Because you sensed, you felt something that's not tangible, that's only recognized by our own heart, which is that everything he said was with his whole heart. He was such a real person. He was so straight. If he saw something wrong, it became his own personal mission to fight for. Things bothered him on such a deep level. You always felt from his passion, from what the Talmidim referred to as a Sharfman rant, the truth, that wholeness. I often wondered when I would talk hashkafa with him, that sometimes he came across, most of the time, he came across as one of the most staunch Talmidim of the Yeshiva, for such a strength of passion and dedication to what he was saying. And other times, he would come off a little sarcastic, a little cynical to some of the hashkafas. And when I was young, I found it a little confusing. Is he brainwashed or not brainwashed? Is he like all the other guys who like, drink the Kool-Aid? But the reality is that there was no such thing to Rabbi Sharfman as a party line. Everything was thought about. If something was true, if it was right, if it was something he felt to his core, he said it with such clarity, with such passion, unmatched by anybody else. But if he felt something might not be true, he was never going to pretend it wasn't a possibility. It's not what he was about. And I want to end with one story that I think brought this home to me, although a little bit embarrassing for me. So I never minded embarrassing myself in public. I had been negotiating for my job for the upcoming year. And, as all negotiations, whether anywhere work, I felt it wasn't going my way. Luckily for Sharfman, about the same day, he asked me to do a pretty big favor for the yeshiva. So it happened to be that it wasn't possible. With all sincerity, I wasn't able to do it. It was over a text. On the text, I decided, not so intelligently, I explained to him why I thought it wasn't why I couldn't do it and I wasn't able to. And then, to some effect, I hope it wasn't so blatant, I said, and it doesn't seem like the yeshiva needs me to do it so much for them anyway. I had been expecting a somewhat empathetic reply and a little bit of words of chizuk. But oh boy, that was not the reply. I can still remember where I received that text in my apartment, where I was standing when I read it. And I don't remember it all. I wish I did. But he wrote back, "Is that really why you do things? Is that really what motivates you?" And he went on for many lines to set me straight. And it hit me, probably not on the spot, that he was saying exactly who he was. He was so straight. He was so real. What people did or people said or appreciated or didn't appreciate, it didn't make one iota of difference. And he was not one of those emotional people that everything is all good and everybody's loving, and that was the speech he gave to himself. If things weren't fair, he knew it. If things weren't right, he understood it. But that didn't change the way he acted. The way he conducted himself, he always did what was right. And that, I believe, is why he had such a profound effect on all those around him and all those who came in contact with him, and how he was able to reach such incredible madrigos. As I look back and appreciate the incredible person Rabbi Sharfman was and the tremendous chus I had, I can only hope that we who had the chus to know him and get close to him will keep that picture of what it means to care about others, of what it means to do what is right. And that should motivate us to be more real, to be more sincere, to stick to what's right even when it's not easy. And that should, Amir Hashem, be a tremendous chus for Rabbi Sharfman Zatzal, a chus for us, a chus for his incredible family who with Herculean efforts continue to push forward, to follow that path that they charted together. Yeh Zachar Baruch.
It's a great kavod for the yeshiva, for the entire mishpacha, to have with us tonight Rav Shaya Cohen, Shlita, Yeshiva Zichronariya in Cedarhurst, Director of Priority 1. I would like to thank Rabbi Cohen for coming and sticking around after the Azkara to help the Talmidim, the members of the community here in South Florida tomorrow. Rav Shaya Cohen. No one's leaving. When you finish, that's
Frankly, I don't think I really had an idea of how difficult a task it would be to try to be mechazik, to try to strengthen the koiches, the resolve, maybe give a little bit nechoma for the family, the yeshiva, for the community. But after listening to what we heard here this evening, it's a very, 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 very difficult task. Such gadlus, such selflessness, such, wasn't emphasized as much, mesiras nefesh mamish, to be able to continue and to be marbitz Torah and love and care and advise under such challenging and difficult personal circumstances for so long without anyone even being aware of what was going on. It's truly a picture of gadlus from a previous generation. But yet, in the most difficult situations in life, we have to find strength. We have to be able to cope. We have to be able to continue. And we have to be able to live with an appreciation of the Chesed Hashem, of all of the amazing brachos that we had, to focus on that maybe even more than how tragic and great the loss. And to be able to go on and live a life of simcha, simchas hachayim, simchas haTorah, simcha with the simchas of the mishpocha and the broader family. And that really is, I believe, an appropriate response and an obligation that we all have. It's very difficult after the fact, in the face of challenge and tragedy, to talk about the Chesed Hashem. The Chesed Hashem is something that has to be implanted in our children at the youngest, most tender ages, so that when they face the vicissitudes of life, the reality of life, the challenges of life, that they're prepared with that foundation of recognition that HaKadosh Baruch Hu kol kuloi chesed. Olam chesed yibone. He created this world as a chesed, for the purpose of chesed, in his essence of chesed. And we have to have that appreciation. Without that, it becomes almost impossible to cope with some of the situations that we have to face in life. It's very interesting that the altar from Slabotka is brought in the Yartzeit, that he learned Pshat when we say in davening every day, Hakodesh betuvoi b'chol yoim tomid maaseh bereishis, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu renews in his goodness every single day the maaseh bereishis, creation itself. And the altar says that that doesn't just mean that he renews the creation every day, but he renews the creation for each and every individual on the face of this earth individually. For you and for you and for you and for me and for everyone. And the question is, what's the raya? Doesn't bring a proof. It seems a big chiddush. It seems almost bizarre. But I think that the pshat is because he's mechadesh betuvoi maaseh bereishis. Maaseh bereishis was a creation of the entire world for one human being, Adam Arishon. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mechadesh betuvoi b'chol yom tomid maaseh bereishis, then he's creating for each and every one individually the entire creation. The magnitude of chesed is mind-boggling for each and every one of us. And all of the billions of people on the face of the earth, he recreates the world in his tuv, in his chesed, each and every single day. But the question arises, what's the raya? The Anshe Knesset Gdoilo, when they were Mesada the Brocha, they said, Ko amur, leoisei oirim gedoilim, ki loilam chastoi. Because I guess the pashtus is the meforshim leoisei, because he, loshen hoive, present tense, he makes, not looso. He didn't create, he is creating every single day. It's an ongoing constant. But according to the way the Alta learns, that doesn't explain it. Because that only explains he's creating the world every day, but not for each and every individual. And it occurred to me that maybe the raya is from the Kila Oilam Chastoi. He's mechadesh betuvei b'chol yom tomid, maaseh bereishis, Kila Oilam Chastoi. Le'olam chastoi means that the Chesed Hashem, the Tuv Hashem, with which He created the whole world, He's Mechadish that Chesed, the same Chesed, Le'olam chastoi, that Chesed exists forever and ever and ever, ki le'olam chastoi. And therefore, since the original Chesed was a whole world for one individual, so too He's Mechadish, the creation, for every single individual, because His Chesed never changes. His Chesed doesn't diminish. It's the same Olam Chesed Yiboneh with which He created the world for Adam Arishon. He recreates that world for each and every individual every single day. Ki la'olam chastoi. And that means that Hashem's Chesed is endless. He's hatoiv ki lo yicholu rachamecho. He's hamerachem ki lo yisamu chasodecho. So everything is Chesed. Everything is Chesed. Chazal tell us, Kol ma de Ovid rachmono letav Ovid. Everything Hashem does is for the good. Okay, His Chesed is endless. It's ki la'olam chastoi. Everything is for the good. But how can we understand that? How can we deal with that? How can we even hear that when we're stricken with so much grief? When we see what magnitude of loss we have suffered? When we realize how much suffering that goes on in this world? It almost seems like not just a daunting task, it seems like an impossible task. How do we manage? How do we measure? How do we cope? How can we comprehend? How do we deal with such issues? Well, I think that it requires great effort. One of the greatest efforts, one of maybe a very powerful and consoling effort, is to re-listen again and again what we heard here this evening and expand upon it and focus on it and realize what chesed we had to have such a giant in our midst. And all the chasodim that so many countless individuals benefited from. We get a sense of chesed. We get a sense of the accomplishments. We get a sense of what the Gemara says, that there are people that in a short lifetime accomplish their full mission. And they are therefore called to a greater mission, to a world that's Hayoim la'asoisum u'mocha lekabel schoram. We can't measure these things. We don't know how to understand these things. But we have to look at the great accomplishments, and they have to be a source of strength. And I dare say that when a family looks at the accomplishments, and when a community and a yeshiva looks at the accomplishments, they have to not only look at the accomplishment of the Choshev and Nifter, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, but Tibodel Lechayim Tovim V'Aruchim, his Rebbetzin. Because everyone knows the Maimer of Rabbi Akiva, that he told his Talmidim that Sheli v'Shelecho Shelo. And that has to be for her, for you, for the entire Mishpocha, a great source of chizuk. Because we together, you together, have accomplished so much. And those accomplishments reverberate l'doirei doiros. When you elevate Talmidim, you create mishpochos, you create descendants, you create Talmidim and Talmidim's Talmidim and Talmidim's Talmidim's Talmidim at soif kol adoiros. And all of that is the work that you, both of you, performed. And as I mentioned, as needs to be reminded with superhuman mesiras nefesh. But it's still so difficult to deal with the questions, with the overwhelming sense of loss that we feel even 2 years later. The truth is that questions, any question, addressed to the Rabbeinu Shalom or about the Rabbeinu Shalom and not addressed to him is not an intellectual question. Intellectually, there are no questions. Intellectually, we're not capable of asking. Intellectually, we probably wouldn't understand the answer even if it was explained to us in simple language. These questions, pain, it's suffering. The pain of the issue, the pain of the question, the pain of the apparent injustice. Tzadik v'raloi, v'rosha v'toivloi, ein biyodenu, loi mi shalvas harishoim, ve'af loi mi yisurei hatzadikim. Sounds like the yisurei hatzadikim is a little bit easier to understand, but these are questions. Madua derech rishoim tzleicho. They're not intellectual questions. We know Rabbi Akiva was maspid his son Reb Shimon, the Gemara in Smochai says. And Rabbi Akiva made a very, very strange hesped. He told the 10,000, I think it says, people that came to Tveria for the Levaya, and he told them, he says, that you're coming here was a nechoma for me. And even had I buried 7 sons, it would have been a nechoma. And then he continues, and don't think it's easy to bury a son. Strange talk. But your coming here has either indicated or has caused that my son is a ben olam haba, and if he's a ben olam haba, then that's the one and only and greatest and total nechama. This world begins where it begins, and is a continuum that goes on forever. It goes on le'olam hanetzach, le'netzach nitzochim. And the neshama that starts in this world lives on, continues in the closest dveikus and relationship with his creator, with the Beirei Olam, for eternity. And that, Rabbi Akiva said, that's the only nechama. And the truth of the matter is that nechama should answer all questions. Hakodesh Baruch Hu has a cheshbon. Hakodesh Baruch Hu knows whose job is to accomplish what, and when that time comes, when he is called to a higher calling. But it's emotionally painful. The loss is painful. The tragedy is painful. The separation is painful. But all questions, why and how and such greatness and such suffering and so young and so, all these questions are all emotional. Intellectually, there's no question. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows how to run the world. He created the world with Hesed, and his Hesed is ki le'olam chastoi. And everything he does is kol ma de'ovid rachmana l'tav ovid. And everything is his. So he knows what he's doing. So this is what should be. This is strange, painful, maybe a little bit offensive to say, but this is l'tav ovid. This is good. We don't understand it. We don't understand it emotionally. It's very interesting. The Saburo learns Pshat in Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, in that kapitel, there's also a question there. Ish bar lo yeda uchsir lo yoven azois. The fool can't understand this. What can't he understand? Bifrach rishoyim kmo Yosef v'yatzitzol kol poyel yoven lihishom dam adayad. How is it that the rishoyim are poireach and they have so much in this world in order to be destroyed forevermore? Okay, so why is the Ish Bar having such a trouble with this? It's very poshut. The Rishoyim get rewarded in this world, in the cheap currency of this world, to be punished in the Olam HaNetzach. The Tzadikim suffer their due in this world for whatever the reason may be, and they're L'Netzach Nitzochim, Nenem Iziv HaShchino, Nafsham Tzrura B'Tzror HaChayim. So, what's so difficult? Teretz is, it's not a intellectual question. It's emotionally painful. What's the answer the Saburo learns? Tzadik hatovor yifroch, ke'erez vavonen yiske, shesunim bebeis Hashem b'chatzris Elokeinu yafrichu. The tzaddik is peireach. The tzaddik accomplishes so much. The tzaddik has so many talmidim. The tzaddik has so much hashpah. The tzaddik's hashpah reverberates years and decades and maybe centuries after he passes from this world. Or yenuvim b'seva d'sheinim v'ra'ananim yiyu. Even in his old age, he's still peireach. He's still fresh. D'sheinim v'ra'ananim. Le'hagid ki yosher Hashem. That tells me that everything Hashem does is yosher, is straight, is right, is good. What's it telling me? What does one thing have to do with the other? The Teretz says the question was not intellectual, and therefore it doesn't require or need at any level an intellectual answer. The answer is emotional. Look at the tzaddik. Look at his accomplishments. Look at the endless reverberations and ramifications of everything that he did. Look at his mesiras nefesh to be able to continue to accomplish to the very end. That's lahagid ki yosher Hashem. That's the answer to any questions, because the questions are only emotional. And seeing that tzaddik and his mesiras nefesh, there can be no questions. And I believe that the description of this Odom, Godol, and Tzaddik that you heard this evening is so clear that it has in its details and in its emotion has the ability to bring such nechama. Because look, under dire circumstances, so much, endless. Everybody could come up with their own story, with their own insight, with their own benefit, with the far-reaching ramifications of the advice and the hashpah and the inspiration and the teaching and the learning. This is lahagid ki yosher Hashem. This answers all questions. And this really can bring about the greatest level of nechama. However, sometimes, even that's not enough. We need more. It's yes, okay, it's not intellectual. We know everything Hashem does is for the good. We know Hoidul Hashem ki toiv ki le'olam chastoi. We understand that. Kol ma de'ovid rachmono de'tav ovid. We understand that. But sometimes we have trouble, like making any sense out of it to calm ourselves down. Okay, emotionally, it's emotional, but the curiosity, but the care, but the concern, but the worry, but the sleepless nights, but the imagination, what if, what could have been, what if this would have been different, and so forth and so on. How do we deal with that? I heard many years ago from my father-in-law, Zichrono Livrocha, the Kapitel Chav Gimel in Tilim, where Dovid HaMelech says, Shivtecho u'mishantecho heimo yenachamuni. Your shevet and your mishenes. The shevet is the whip. The mishenes is the cane. They cause me nechama. How does a whip bring about nechama? A whip is not a source of nechama. A cane is allegorically a source of nechama, but not a whip. What's going on? And he said, a moshel to a shepherd who's grazing his flock on a beautiful sunny day. Everything seems so perfect and wonderful. As the day wanes, it's time to gather in his charges and to take account of how many, make sure they're all there. And he realizes that one little Shep Zilla is unaccounted for, is out there someplace in the fields as it starts to get dark. And he sets out with his whip to find her. As it's getting dark, this poor little Shep Zilla is crying, is worried. It's dangerous, it's dark, it's scary. What's going to be? Where's the shepherd? And all of a sudden, the shepherd spots her in the distance and cracks that whip over her back. Shivtecho yenachamuni. The shepherd is with me. I feel the connection to the shepherd. We have the ability in the most dire circumstances, and sometimes even more in the more difficult and tragic circumstances than in the good times. We have the ability to use this to connect with the Borei Olam, to realize that this can lead us to a deeper connection. We feel such a void. We need it to be filled. We feel so lonely. We need his companionship. We feel so confused. We need to draw him further into our lives so that he could help straighten out our thinking and give us the strength and the presence of mind and the peace of mind to be able to continue in life. And these situations, they provide, somewhat sadly, but a unique opportunity to be able to connect in a new dimension with the Borei Olam. I know, and permit me to reflect a little personally, that many years ago, when I suffered a personal tragedy, I believe that I realized, that I recognized for the first time, a dimension of relationship with Hakodesh Baruch Hu that I had no imagination. I couldn't imagine that it ever existed. Not I didn't know it existed, not I didn't feel it, not I didn't have it. I couldn't imagine that it existed. But unfortunately, that loss, that emptiness, that pain, that need to embrace the Borei Olam with a passion more than anything I've ever had in the good times, brought me to a level of connection and of dveikus that I couldn't have imagined existed. But there was something else as I reminisce about this personal tragedy, and I'd like to share it with you because I think there is a need to at least consider some type of a human scenario explanation. 2 weeks before this event took place, I had asked one of the teachers to tell a story out of Malka for a girls' school. And they told the following story. An elderly couple didn't have children for years. Finally, she was getting older. They went to the Rebbe. They got a brocha, had a boy. The boy lived for 5 years and passed away. They were very tzibrochen. The woman was already too old to have children, and they were shattered. They went back to the Rebbe almost with a taina. Hayitochen, you gave us. The Rabbi Shalom gave us this wonderful child. And we had 5 beautiful years, and now he took him from us. And the Rebbe told them, again, I don't know how he knew, but the Rebbe told them that this child that you had a very special neshama. Had a neshama from a ger tzedek that lived hundreds of years ago. At 5 years old, he left. He was a prince. He grew up in the king's palace. He was enamored with the Jewish tutor that they had hired for him, and he left with the tutor to become a ger tzedek. And he lived a life of superhuman piety, beyond what anyone could imagine. A tzaddik gomur, a tzaddik yesoid olam. He finished his life, and he comes to the olam emes, and he's told that he's not shaykh. La'elo la'elo. But he has 5 years that was shaloi b'kedusha. He has to go back to this world in a gilgul of a neshama. A gilgul neshama, his neshama has to enter another body and live up those 5 years b'kedusha v'tahara to be mashlim the gadlus of this superhuman tzaddik. I must admit that at that Malka, I was extremely annoyed. I understand it's a nice story, maybe it's an important story, Okay, but that's not an entertaining story. It's not the story you tell if you're asked to entertain at a Malka to tell a story to make everybody feel good. Certainly is not a very feel-good type of a story. 2 weeks later, I was on the plane with my wife to bury my 5-year-old son in Eretz Yisrael. And all of a sudden, I turned to her. He was talking to us. That was a message for us. And it gave us such chizuk. This neshama had 5 years, 5.5 years it was, had to come down to this earth. I even used to say, I know whose neshama it was. My wife told me, I don't know what I'm talking about. And come down to this world to live, to be mashlim, that gadlus from someone from a previous generation. And we had that privilege. And it gave us such chizuk. Do I know what happened? No. Do I have any indication? Maybe I have some indications. That's not for public consumption. But no idea. But the thought, the scenario, the possibility, the curiosity, being able to be calmed by some scenario that maybe a mahalach, something I could hear. And we have to know that the Sforim say that in the Ikvis of the Mashiach, before Mashiach comes, there are going to be many, many neshamas that are coming back to this world from Gedolei Olam. And when you see a great giant with such Mesiras Nefesh, with such hashpah, with such depth, with such gadlus, come into this world and live a relatively short period of time. But a period of time that has produced so much. Without the Yenuvim B'Seva, but so much, so many peiros, so many peiros, so many deiros, not just the family and the children and the grandchildren, but talmidim and mushpoim all over. Then this has to be a source of chizuk. This neshama came here. It had a mission. It had a time. And as bereaved as we feel, we have to feel privileged to have had this opportunity to be able to help, to be able to support, to be able to be inspired by, to be able to make it possible for this giant to do the work that he's been doing, which his Rebbetzin and his family have made it. And that has to be a source of nechama. The truth of the matter is that Yoav suffered tzoros tzuros. 10 children were lost, became terribly ill, lost all of his super wealth that he had. That's a broch in a mensch. And he spent much effort together with his chaverim. They couldn't talk during the whole shiva, it seems. They sat there silently, it says. But after they spent much effort trying to understand what happened here. Such a tzaddik. Vos tutzach. What could be? What could it possibly explain this tragic situation? Ad kedei kach that the Medrash Tanchuma says that really in Shmona Esrei we were supposed to say Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchok, Elokei Yaakov, Velokei Yoav. Such a tzaddik he was. Except when he suffered, he questioned. I don't know how much, to what extent, it's not clear. We don't know how to read even the psukim, even what the meforshim say, but there was something there. There was, what's going on? What happened? What's going on? The Avos, they reached untold levels of shleimus, and yet they suffered. Each one suffered tremendously. Avraham, Yishmael, Yitzchok, and Esav. Yaakov, tzoros with his children, with his life. And they never asked a question. Hashem was able to put his name on them. Miyached Shemoy Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. But Yoav, who was a tzaddik of equal or relatively equal merit, who could have been qualified to be mentioned in the Birchas Avos, but he questioned. And After 38 prokim, Perek Lamed Ches, Hashem finally addresses Yoav and explains to him what's going on over here. But it's interesting to note that Rashi, in the previous Posuk, says that before he even told him that, he hinted to him that he was going to have children again and get back his health and his wealth. He hinted to him some optimism. And only then was he able to cope with the answer that Hashem answered him. Vayomer Hashem el Yoav, Eifo hoyisa biyosti oretz. Were you around at the beginning of creation? Do you know all of my considerations? Do you know whose neshama had to come back? Do you know whose mission had to be accomplished? Do you know how much a person is able and capable of being accomplished? Do you know how much a person has to be in this world and when he has to move on to the next world? You don't know anything. Somewhat like what the Welt says, that this world is like a tapestry. If you're upstairs, you see all the interactions, this beautiful needlepoint that mamish goes from the beginning of creation on for eternity, and it's so beautiful, and it makes so much sense, and it all comes together. And down here in Nebuchadnezzar, we see is the bottom, the other side, the shreds, the disheveled threads hanging down here, and it looks such a mess, so confusing. It's so shaloi b'darduna. What's going on over here? They say they once asked the Hasidic Rebbe in one of the camps during the Holocaust, they say, why does Hashem do such things? And the Rebbe said, I'm an old man, and I learned a long time ago, I don't ask Hashem why. I'm afraid if I ask him why, he'll tell me, you want to know why? Come on upstairs, I'll be able to show you the whole picture. And I'm not quite ready to go. There's a picture. Everything makes sense. Everything is Hesed. It's so hard though to feel it because of the pain, because of the loss. And therefore I believe we have the need, and maybe for us the right. Yoav did lose out because of that, but I'm not sure that we're zeicher to be in Ovois anyway. And to come up with some kind of understanding. And the truth of the matter is, when we see a life that in such a short time accomplished so much, the accomplishments, I'm sure it's me'at mize'er that we heard presented today, but just gives you a sense, if you extrapolate a little bit, to imagine the magnitude and the length and the future and the doiros and the continued hashpah. And we have to look at that. We have to say, yeah, we don't understand, but we see. Maybe, who knows? Who knows who's neshama? Who knows what mission? But one thing we do know, so many great accomplishments. The Hasidim have a very interesting way of explaining and coping with the difficulties of life. One of the stories they tell is about Reb Zisha. They say that they sent a delegation to Reb Zisha, and he was supposed to explain to them, what does it mean, smeichin b'yisurim, lismoyach b'yisurim, to rejoice in suffering. And they finally came to Reb Zisha, and they saw this broken house, and he was living in such poverty. And he walked out such a sickly-looking human being. And they said, we were sent to you for you to explain to us, what does it mean, lismoyach b'yisurim? And Reb Zisha looks at them incredulously, and he says, I don't know why they sent you to me. I never suffered a day in my life. We have the ability, when we recognize Hashem's chesed. Dovid HaMelech said it. Chesed u mishpat shiro. Al chesed shiro, al mishpat shiro. In halacha, we only paskin. On mishpat, we say dayan ho'emes. Only on good, we say atov ha'metiv. But Dovid HaMelech was able to say hallel on mishpat as well. because he saw and he knew that everything Hashem does is kol kuloi chesed. And we have to be able to feel that and internalize that. And yes, we suffer tragedy. Yes, it's very painful. But when we recognize that this is all part of a master plan, this is all part of the Chesed Hashem, this is the way it had to be, and maybe this is the price that had to be paid for so much accomplishment in life, and that's not for us to say, probably not even to conjecture, but that's the way we act sometimes and we think sometimes. And there has to be a tremendous source of Nahama. The Hasidim tell another story. Also, I don't know how they know, but they tell the story that there was a small little shtetl, and they had a Rebbe, and everyone came to the Rebbe with his tzoros, and the Rebbe would be mispal for them, and the Rebbe would help them, and the Rebbe would advise them, and Hashem, they lived so happily for so many years with the Rebbe. Finally, the word went out that the Rebbe is very ill, and he passed away. They were shattered, not only for the loss of this great, wonderful Rebbe, but what are we going to do now? Who are we going to come to with all our tzoros? Who's going to help us with all the challenges that we face all the time? Until one day, one of the people there came up. He says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "If the Rebbe was able to help us in this world, then in Himmel, in Shamayim, the Rebbe will be closer to the Rabbeinu Shalom. He'll be able to do for us nitshayach, all kinds of mifsim. He'll be able to help us with all our tzoros." And they're davening, ich weiß not exactly what, if you're allowed or not, whatever, but the Rebbe's not helping them. Nothing. How you talking? Revenue, you know what we're suffering so much. You always helped us. How can you forsake us like this? And one day, the Rosh HaKol, someone there has a dream. The Rebbe comes to him in a dream and he says, "I see you suffering, and I really wish that I could help you. But from the perspective and the vantage point that I have here, I can't ask Hashem to end this suffering. I see the benefits. I see the schusim. I see what it's leading to. I see the bigger picture. I see Eifo Yisa B'Yosti Oretz to the end of time, L'Neitzach Nitzochim. I see the great neshamas and what they have to accomplish in this world. And how can I ask for anything else? There's something to it when we realize that Hashem has a cheshbon for everything. From the true perspective of what life is all about, it's a completely different story. The Tosfos Rid has a Haggadah. So I don't think it's a very well-known thing, but it's available. And in it, on the phrase "Mitchila oivdei avodah zora hoy avoseinu," he asks a kasha. He says, "We thank Hashem for taking us out of Mitzrayim. If He wouldn't have put us in, He wouldn't have to take us out. What's the big deal? Marash. What is the gewalt? He took us out of Mitzrayim. Shkoyach. You put us in there in the first place. What's going on?" So Tosfos Rid says like this: Mitchila oivdei avodah zora hoy avoseinu. We stem from Terach. As B'nai Terach, we were not capable of deserving the mitzvahs, Shabbos, and I guess, and the Mon, and Kabbalas HaTorah, and everything, all of the brochas and all of the hatova that Hashem is giving Klal Yisrael, wanted to give Klal Yisrael. And we couldn't earn it. So He put us in Mitzrayim, and He made us go through trials and tribulations. V'chas aleinu. And He had rachmanas on us. And that's why we were able to be zoiche to all the mitzvahs and to Kabbalah's HaTorah, because in din, we couldn't have been zeicha. We needed this, I would call it the entitlement of Yisurim. Yisurim sometimes entitle us to achieve that which we never could have achieved. We have no idea of the Rabbeinu Shalom's chishbonis. All we know is that he knows why everything is for the good. When we see such massive accomplishments, we can find some basis to get a little more chizuk, because we see that the accomplishments live on. The individual lives on. How does Rashi say? Eile tolos noach, ikamai noach ish tzadik, iko tolosem shel tzadikim masim tovim. So the Balei Musa point out, the Noach, the tolos of Noach is the whole Bria. Everybody today and everyone in all the generations, past and future, are all tolos Noach. Yet you know what his Iker tolos Sehem was? His Masim Tovim. Eile tolos Noach, Noach ish tzadik. It gives us a certain level of chizuk. And when we know that, even if we don't know, but oftentimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes us go through certain things in order to bring about even greater accomplishments, in order to bring about Yeshuas for families, for Moistas HaTorah, for communities, for Klal Yisrael. And we know, Chazal tell us, Bekroi Vayakodesh. That's what the Posuk is, that it's the giants that serve as the korbonos, sometimes for the generation. And if we try to come to grips on some level with what's going on, with the underpinning and the firm knowledge that Kol Mad Avrach Mor L'Tavovid. I remember when we sat the Shiva in Eretz Yisrael, I remember my mother-in-law saying from the kitchen, I remember hearing it, Anit Emunah wollt min gar nicht gekannt euch halten. If not for our Emunah, we wouldn't be able to live through tragedy. It's only that Emunah. It's only that realization of the Chesed Hashem. It's only that realization of Kol Mada Ovid Rachmon L'Tavovid. It's only that realization of how much Hashem loves us, and the tzaddikim, and the marbitzei Torah, and the rebbeim, and the mashpiyim, and the moisrei nafsham, living al kiddush Hashem, not just dying al kiddush Hashem, but living al kiddush Hashem with every koyach left in their being to be able to continue to be mashpiyah, to be marbitz Torah. So we know Kodesh Baruch Hu has cheshbonis. And those cheshbonos have to be a source of chizuk and Nahama to us. As time goes on, it becomes easier and easier to cope. It never becomes easy. But when we look at the legacy, the hashpah, the ongoing influence reverberating from generation to generation, that has to be a tremendous source of nechama to the family, to the talmidim, and to the entire community. Kodesh Baruch Hu should help that the Rebbetzin Tichye should be able to continue with her family, taking the role that she shared with her husband and being able to lead them into the future. And the Talmidim and the Moistas and the community members should be forever Makir Toiv, not only to the memory of Rabbi Sharfman, Zechat Tzadik Livrocha, but Tibodel L'chaim Toivim, to his Rebbetzin and to his entire family, who are also Meisa Nefesh for everything that we have, for everything that he accomplished, for all of the benefits that he has afforded all of us. The Novi says, the Novi Yeshaya, it's the Haftarah of Parshas Noach, it's Yirmiyah. Says, Berega koten azavtich uverachamim gedoylem akabtzech. I have forsaken you for a moment and gathered you in with great mercy. And the Radak is concerned. Rega koten. The Golus is long and bitter. What's this Rega koten azavtich? And the Radak says an amazing thing. He says, when we will see the Rachmei Dishmaya, the Kibbutz Golius, the Rachmei Dishmaya, the Rachamim of Hashem has such therapeutic powers that in retrospect it will make the entire Golus long and bitter and bloody and tragic in retrospect appear like just a Rega Koten. Kodesh Baruch Hu should help, that all of the wounds should be healed, and we should feel and see that Rachmei Dishmaya to the extent that'll be Berachamim Gedolim Berega Koten Azavtich, that'll be Mekuyim, what we say in davening every day, V'choser Mimenu Yogoin V'anocha. The memory of Rabbi Sharfman, Zichet Tzadik Livrocha, should be a source of inspiration to all. Yehi Zichroi Baruch.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. We'll be davening Marav now.